Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 30th of November, comes to you from London. And we look at what's happened in the night before, just where charts have closed, and the outlook for the day ahead. And so we look at the weekly charts, 1% point and figure, the medium term, which is daily, and a 0.5% point and figure log scale, and then the short term, 60-minute chart and the 60-minute point and figure. So this is your long, medium, and short-term view, and we just go through the stocks. And so we start by looking at the dollar index. All this price data today coming from Bloomberg. Updata runs on multiple data feeds. So we start on Bloomberg today, and we see the dollar index is just having a slightly negative week this week, and that pullback just showing through here in the price. We pulled back from 102 to 101. And we are below the cloud on the short term over the last few days, so that is just putting us into a bearish frame. If we close below this, if we spend an hour below this 100.6 level, then we activate this downside target of 98.78, so 2% downside. So we could see the dollar pull back as much as 2%, but at the moment it's looking bullish, and bearish short term. So we need to see the next kick up above the cloud before we'd say that it's going to run again today. So at the moment we're on a little bit of a knife edge, just waiting. And of course, if we look at the euro, we're seeing that same picture in reverse. Bearish below the cloud, bearish here. Lots of downside targets, 102, 103. Some really scary downside targets here, not yet activated, but well below $1 for the euro. But in the short term, we are just seeing a potential recovery to 109. If we can close above the 107 level, then we would activate that. And we're seeing a move up here this morning, so we're bullish on the euro in the short term. So just seeing a little bit of euro strength, dollar weakness, and that's showing through on the Japanese yen. Dollar actually looking pretty strong here, just hitting cloud resistance on the weekly, but a really big move this month in the dollar, and actually just coming bullish again. So it's not guaranteed that the dollar will pull back. If we look at sterling, we're seeing sterling just improving against the dollar a little bit here as well, above the cloud, just nudging this 125 level. So really quite key there. If we look at the euro sterling, sterling has been really mixed against the euro. It's neither currency really having a clear direction. We're seeing that just in the flattening of the daily chart. We've got targets to the upside, targets to the downside. Most of the upside suggests that sterling will have the upper hand against the euro in the weeks ahead. If we look at the sterling Swiss, again, just seeing some strength here in sterling versus the Swiss and some upside targets. So it looks like sterling is trying to just recover against the Swiss currency. Better looking chart than the US dollar. If we look at the Australian dollar, sterling, just another chart as a proxy for sterling. We're seeing here below the cloud, and below the cloud. Still means weak sterling overall. So Australian dollar is showing a bit of strength there. Next we look at stock markets. The S&P 500 did manage to hang on to this 2200 level last night. This level looking pretty critical. Long-term upside targets, lots of support here that was almost met back in the start of the year. We do have upside targets on these charts to around 23, 26%, 18% on some of these targets. So really strong long-term upside, and quite a good run over the last couple of weeks. Short-term upside target of 22.63. That's the about 2.65%. So we are just seeing quite a lot of upside potential there. When you see these targets, you can't ignore them. We had this target of 23.41 in place quite some time ago off the first move in June. So really key that target is now starting to play through. Nasdaq hasn't been quite as strong, just finding resistance here. We can see that resistance really kicking in, and if we just take a look at that, really just they're struggling to get through this 4900 level. Once we're through there, then we'd expect the Nasdaq to run. We see the sideways consolidation pattern on the weekly chart, move up, sideways, waiting for the next move up. Bullish on the 60-minute chart now. Upside potential of 5.3, 4.7%. 5100 is really the place that we look like we're set to go on the Nasdaq. So it's going to catch up too. Dow Jones, of course, making all-time highs. Really strong looking chart. US bellwether stocks really just lots of upside potential, 10% upside in the short term. Market's looking pretty bullish, and the Russell 2000 again has been running of late, just starting to flatten off after that run, and we do see a little bit of downside on the short-term chart of about 1.2. So it looks like the big caps and Nasdaq might now show through. Just taking a look at the futures in London, not any great action here this morning as before the US market opens, but we're just seeing the Nasdaq E-mini back above the cloud. Upside potential here on the target. Keep an eye on the 1-minute charts if you're trading the E-mini. Really, really interesting. If we take a look at FTSE looking stronger this morning, but below the cloud still, and these downside targets weighing over us. The daily chart just wandering through, really struggling to make any great impact. US market's the best respite for dragging the FTSE up, but we are just seeing here that we are in this sideways range. FTSE 250, much the same picture, and we do have these downside targets hanging over us. Expect the US market to drag us up. The DAX, another market with strong resistance here. We see that resistance playing through here, about the 10,800 level. Really just a long consolidation of months. If we break, it's like a coiled spring. We should expect to then start running. But at the moment, we are just below the cloud, struggling through on the short-term chart. We do have downside targets. No real clear upside targets on the DAX, so it's quite a challenging market. Looks like a long ascending triangle here. That's showing up in the weekly chart. We can just put those lines on. We do see here this ascending triangle just starting to break, so it does look like the DAX will probably break and run. If we take a look at the Nikkei, Nikkei's looking still pretty good. Through on the weekly on the price, not yet on the lagging line. Daily chart looking good. Above the cloud, just flattening out of late, but it's 12% upside to play for. These all global markets starting to look a lot better into next year. Shanghai looking good. Not yet on the weekly are we through, but on the daily and the 60-minute, pulling back at the moment, but key. Hang Seng has just come out of the doldrums. A lot of downside targets here that we're here to play for, but it looks like we're finding some support here. So again, quite key. The Indian market just starting to recover, has been in the doldrums there, but it looks like it's starting to recover, but below the cloud on the weekly chart there. If we take a look at the Australian market, Aussie market just starting to get through on the weekly, also just on the daily, but and bullish on the 60-minute, but pulling back now. If we can make new highs, that's another 9.5% upside. So really, they're all to play for. Taking a look at Brent, we see here on commodities, Brent crude. OPEC meeting today, a lot of nervousness in front of that, but we see here we're really in the cloud. That is the uncertainty. We were above, then we were below, and now we're in the cloud. On the weekly chart, we're just struggling to get through for a long-term recovery. A bit of a big move here this morning, moved back, so we're just coming back through on the cloud after a big fall yesterday. There's a lot of volatility ahead of this meeting. No clear upside targets on the short-term chart. Keep an eye on the 1-minute chart. And here we see the WTI crude price again just kicking up as well. Not clear where the upside targets are on these short-term charts, but just holding the bullish position. So a lot hanging off this meeting, a lot of uncertainty showing through. Take a look at US nat gas, has been really strong of late, just hitting this October high again, 337, so a bit of resistance there, but through with this week's move on the weekly chart. Long-term recovery for the first time in a few years, back above the cloud. Upside targets of 3.5, 5.4. These are very long-term upside targets, but it looks like nat gas is really on a big trend change here. So interesting there to see that. Keep an eye on these charts. We need to break above this sideways consolidation for it to run further. If we look at the corn future, that's up strongly this morning, up 1%, but bearish on the weekly, bearish on the 60-minute, and only just bullish on the daily. A mixed picture there as well. Coffee has had a great run of late, but over the recent weeks and months, turning bullish in the long and medium term, but short term the picture is down, and we do have downside targets of 3 and 6% on the short-term point and figure chart, so a lot of volatility creeping in there. If we take a look at gold, gold is just creeping through on the 60-minute chart, just turning bullish. That upside target of 1215 activated. We expect to see that 1200 level back above there. We are looking a bit bearish here on the half percent point and figure chart, but on the longer term 1% chart, we're pulling back, hitting support. We do have a downside target, but a very strong upside target as well. This target was here, has been taken off, it's been negated with the move below, so that is a little bit bearish for gold, but we are still bullish on the weekly, and we're now just turning through on the short term. If we look at silver, silver tends to lead gold a bit. This was through on the cloud earlier, and we see upside targets here of about 3% as well. So really interesting, and just pulling back to cloud support. Copper has been the real story lately, and we are just below the cloud in the last day or two. So we're seeing a sell-off here of about 3.5% on the medium-term chart. So really strong upside potential. Copper really making a long-term transition into a bullish trend. Take a look at the US Treasury, 10-year Treasury bond, the yield through on this cloud really for the first time in a few years, really starting to look like we're making moves back towards the levels we saw in 2013-14. Still just bearish on the short-term chart, downside potential about 219, two targets suggesting that level about 5% downside in the yield, but at the moment the big story is that we have made those long-term moves. Keep an eye out on the levels here. This 228 level, pretty key. If we break below that, then we should sell off a little bit more on the yield. If we take a look at some of the US tech stocks, Apple now bullish, no clear upside targets. Google now bullish also, no really clear upside targets again, but bullish on all time frames. Amazon, all these charts now starting to turn bullish, not quite as bullish as the other ones. We've still got a downside potential here, and it's a bit worrying on the daily cloud chart. Facebook showing strength again, a bit worrying on the daily chart, but through on the 60-minute, waiting for a move to break out of this sideways range of the last few days. Look at this long-term trend. Lots of targets to the upside, still looking good in the long run. Microsoft making new all-time highs this year, taking out the 2000 high, really just running. Look at that trend, doubled in price over the last few years, and strong targets to the upside, and some very good short-term targets here and above the cloud as well. And an Nvidia, where will it stop? It's just holding this sideways move, but an unbelievable chart. Just shows there are still stocks out there that are doing amazingly well. That's it for today. Keep an eye on those dollar moves, and until next week, happy charting. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.